Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. We
Yeah.
love to really dig into the topics that matter. And today is no exception. We're going to be talking about something that's, I think, fundamentally changing the game for a lot of IT folks. And that's the rise of generative AI and specifically large language models, LLMs,
Absolutely.
and how they're impacting the work of IT solution architects.
Yeah, it's a fascinating area because we're not talking about architects building AI systems from the ground up, right?
Mm.
It's more about how these AI tools are being used by architects in their day-to-day work as incredibly powerful assistants in their existing roles.
Right, like almost like a co-pilot in a way.
Exactly, a co-pilot.
And we've gathered a wealth of sources and information for this episode. And we're going to really try to distill, what are the crucial insights from all this material?
Right.
So that you walk away with a really clear understanding of what is the potential of GenAI to reshape IT architecture and the way we think about it.
Yeah, and we're going to be looking at it from all angles, too. I mean, we've got material covering everything from that initial architectural planning and design phase all the way through to, the kind of broader organizational implications and what the future might hold.
Right. It's not just about the technology itself. It's about the ripple effects across the entire organization.
Absolutely.
And to make this a little bit more digestible, we've kind of broken it down into 8 key areas. You could think of them as like the core disciplines of an architect's work.
Yeah, makes sense.
And then within each of those areas, we've got, specific subsections so you can really get granular and understand, the nuances.
Details.
Yeah, so why don't we just jump right in and let's start with the foundation, architectural planning design.
Right.
So what's really the cutting edge here when it comes to AI and how it's changing this initial phase?
Well, one of the most striking things is just the sheer acceleration that GenAI is bringing to those really foundational stages of a project. So imagine being able to rapidly produce, those initial designs, the visual models, even the preliminary documentation.
Wow.
LLMs are proving remarkably adept at this. They can take, these complex system descriptions and generate natural language explanations of what's going on. They can even propose different ways that all the components should interact.
So it's almost like, you're an architect and you're facing that blank canvas at the start of a project.
Right.
And you can kind of feed in the high-level business needs, and the AI can almost generate like a first-pass technical blueprint.
Exactly.
Am I understanding that correctly?
You are. That's exactly it. And it's not just about speeding things up. It's not just about doing things faster. It's also about augmenting the ways that we've traditionally thought about architecture. So you've got established frameworks like TOGF, which is this comprehensive methodology for designing and governing enterprise IT architecture.
Right.
And the Zachman framework, which is sort of a more abstract way of categorizing, the different architectural artifacts. Okay.
And AI is being used to, annotate these existing models to suggest improvements based on, best practices. It's learned from countless examples.
It's like it's seen all the architectures.
It's seen a lot.
And it knows what works and what doesn't.
Exactly. And what's also interesting is we're starting to see these reference architectures emerging that are specifically designed for systems that incorporate LLMs themselves.
Oh, wow. So it's not just changing the existing ways of doing things. It's creating entirely new approaches to handle this new AI-centric.
All right, the two-pronged approach.
And, I remember seeing something in the research about Archimate.
Oh, yeah, Archimate.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
So the Archimate standard, that's that visual language for describing enterprise architectures, that's also being integrated into, these AI-powered architectural practices.
Okay.
It gives you a structured way to represent these AI-driven designs, and it helps ensure that everyone's on the same page.
Right. Clarity of communication is key, especially when you're dealing with complex systems.
So we've talked a lot about, the kind of the theoretical underpinnings, but let's get practical here.
Sure.
What are some real-world examples of how architects are actually using these tools today?
So we've got a couple of really compelling use cases here.
Okay.
One is what we could call AI-accelerated blueprint generation.
Okay.
So imagine you're an architect, you've gathered your high-level requirements, and you input those into this LLM-based tool. And almost instantaneously, it drafts these initial architectural diagrams.
Wow.
But what's interesting is it's not just generic templates.
Right.
It's actually incorporating, design patterns and industry best practices that it's learned from this vast corpus of architectural knowledge.
So it's not just drawing boxes and arrows, it's actually thinking about how these things should be structured.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that gives the architect a much more informed and efficient starting point.
That's got to save a ton of time in those early phases.
A significant amount of time.
What's another one?
So another one is what we could call AI-augmented requirement, traceability, and synthesis.
Right. And this is really about dealing with the fire hose of information that you get from stakeholder interviews, right?
Yeah.
You've got all these transcripts and notes.
Yeah.
Well, an LLM can now process those transcripts, automatically extract the core requirements, and then generate a preliminary system architecture diagram.
Wow.
And what's even more impressive is that it can suggest relevant design patterns,
Huh.
and flag potential scalability considerations right from the get-go.
So it's understanding the underlying needs and proactively suggesting directions.
Exactly. It's like taking a week's worth of stakeholder meetings and distilling it into a visual architectural proposal within minutes.
That's pretty mind-blowing.
It is. It's really powerful stuff.
But with all this automation, I mean, it sounds amazing, but what are some of the things that architects need to be cautious about? Are there any potential pitfalls or things to watch out for?
Yeah. I mean, validation is absolutely key.
Okay.
You really need to rigorously verify everything that the AI produces.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we've all heard about these AI hallucinations, right? Where it might generate something that sounds plausible but is actually incorrect.
Right.
So making sure that it's aligned with, your governance, your security protocols, all the compliance mandates, that's absolutely essential.
So it's a powerful assistant, but one that required that careful human oversight.
Yeah, that human in the loop is still critical.
Absolutely. So let's move on to our next area, and this is another one that I think is really ripe for disruption from AI, and that's application development, integration, and middleware.
Yeah, this is a big one.
Huge. So let's talk about that. How is GenAI changing the game when it comes to building and connecting applications?
So one of the most significant impacts is just the sheer speed and efficiency that GenAI is bringing to both the development lifecycle and the often very complex world of system integration.
Right.
So LLMs can automatically generate code snippets for common tasks. They can define API specifications. They can even create, those initial integration tests for middleware components.
So it's like it's taking over a lot of the manual coding work that developers used to have to do.
Absolutely. It can really reduce the manual effort involved in connecting these disparate systems.
Yeah, because integration is often one of the biggest bottlenecks in IT projects.
Oh, it's a huge pain point.
It can be a nightmare. So AI is kind of stepping in to be like a universal translator between all these different applications.
Precisely. And that's especially important when you're trying to connect those older legacy systems to modern cloud-based services.
Yeah, that's a challenge a lot of organizations are facing.
It's a constant challenge. And we're also seeing, existing integration frameworks and middleware platforms being enhanced with these LLM-powered assistants to speed up API development.
Oh, wow. So it's like the tools themselves are getting smarter.
Exactly. And you mentioned LangChain earlier.
Right.
That's a great example of a tool that's specifically designed to connect and orchestrate different AI models. And it's providing these specific integration patterns for LLM-powered applications.
So LangChain is definitely a name to keep an eye on as we move forward with this.
Absolutely. It's becoming a core part of the landscape.
Okay, so let's talk about, again, a real-world example of this in action. Can you give us a use case where this is really making a difference?
Yeah. So one really interesting use case is what we could call AI-driven middleware code generation for seamless system integration.
Okay.
So an architect can describe at a high level, the integration outcome they want.
Right.
And the AI will actually generate the necessary middleware code, things like API connectors, data transformation pipelines to make those systems talk to each other.
Wow.
And what's great is it can also generate automated tests to make sure that the integration works as intended right from the start.
Oh, that's huge.
So you reduce manual coding, you reduce the potential for errors.
Yeah.
It's a win-win.
Faster time to deployment, potentially.
Absolutely faster, safer deployment.
That's great. What's another use case in this space?
Another one is what we could call a context-aware integration recommendation engine.
Interesting.
So in these really complex IT environments where you've got tons of interconnected systems,
Right.
an LLM tool can analyze all of that system log data, all the performance metrics,
Right.
to identify potential bottlenecks or areas for optimization in those integration flows.
So it's not just about building new connections. It's also about refining and optimizing the ones we already have.
Exactly. And it can recommend specific adjustments based on real-time operational data.
So it's like an AI consultant coming in and saying, hey, You could tweak this, you could tweak that, and you'd see a performance improvement.
It's like having an extra set of expert eyes on your system.
That's pretty cool. But just like with the architectural design side, are there any watch-outs here? Any potential downsides that we need to be aware of?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just because the AI generates code doesn't mean you can just blindly trust it.
Right.
You still need that human review to make sure that it adheres to your coding standards, that the overall code quality is good.
Right. Quality control is still essential.
Absolutely. And you also need to be mindful of potential latency issues or reliability concerns that might arise. I mean, speed is great, but not at the expense of stability and performance.
Right. Stability and reliability, those are non-negotiables in IT.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's move on to another area that I know resonates with a lot of organizations out there, and that's legacy system modernization and documentation.
Oh, yeah, the legacy challenge.
A lot of companies are dealing with this. So let's talk about how AI is changing that game.
So legacy systems, right, they can be a real drag on innovation.
Absolutely.
But GenAI offers some really promising ways to address this. LLMs can be used to analyze those complex, often very poorly documented legacy code bases.
Right.
And what's really powerful is they can reverse engineer undocumented functionalities and generate clear, up-to-date technical documentation.
That's huge, because trying to understand how those old systems work can be like archaeology sometimes.
It's like deciphering hieroglyphics. And not only that, they can suggest ways to refactor the code and even help automate the translation to more modern programming languages.
So it's like taking something ancient and giving it a modern makeover.
Exactly, breathing new life into it.
That's fantastic. And are we seeing any, specific tools or platforms emerging to handle this?
Yeah, there are some really interesting proprietary tools out there, like IBM's ICA and Microsoft's modernization toolkits.
Okay.
And they're being increasingly used in conjunction with the power of LLMs to really amplify their effectiveness.
It's like the best of both worlds, the domain expertise and the AI muscle.
Exactly, the perfect pairing.
So can you give us an example of a specific use case where this is having a real impact?
So one compelling use case is what we could call automated code refactoring and documentation.
Okay.
So imagine an organization that's struggling with these mission-critical but outdated COBOL systems.
We've all seen those.
We have, and an AI tool can be deployed to automatically refactor that COBOL code, make it more understandable, more maintainable, and at the same time, generate all that comprehensive technical documentation.
So you're modernizing the code and you're capturing that knowledge that was often locked away in people's heads.
Exactly. It's preserving that tribal knowledge.
That's incredibly valuable.
It is. It's a huge asset.
What's another use case?
Another one is what we could call an automated legacy code analyzer and documenter.
Okay.
So an AI tool can scan through a legacy code base, identify, outdated or problematic components, suggest refactoring opportunities, and then generate that detailed documentation.
So it's like an AI consultant coming in and giving you a roadmap for modernization.
Exactly. And it's not just a theoretical roadmap, it's a very practical one.
Right. It's based on the actual code.
Based on the code itself.
So it sounds like AI is really making the prospect of modernization much less daunting.
It's definitely taking away a lot of the fear and uncertainty.
But are there any, potential downsides or things that architects need to be cautious about when using AI in this way?
Yeah, I mean, data privacy is a huge concern.
Right, especially when you're talking about proprietary code.
Absolutely. You've got to be very careful about feeding that into LLMs, especially if they're hosted externally.
Right.
Robust security measures are essential to protect that intellectual property.
Makes sense.
And as always, you need to validate the generated documentation, make sure it's accurate and complete.
Right.
And the integration with the developer's IDE, that's also crucial for adoption.
Yeah, if it doesn't fit into the existing workflow, it's not going to get used.
Exactly. Usability is key.
Okay, let's move on to intelligent operations and automation.
All right.
This is another area where it seems like AI has the potential to really revolutionize things.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. How is AI transforming IT operations?
So one of the most exciting aspects here is the potential for AI-driven automation to really optimize those day-to-day IT operations, everything from incident management to performance monitoring. Right.
Keeping the lights on.
Yeah, keeping the lights on and doing it more efficiently.
So instead of relying on all that manual troubleshooting and reactive responses,
Right.
AI can step in and handle a lot of the routine work.
That's the goal. And this is where we see the growing importance of concepts like MLOps.
Okay.
which is about managing the life cycle of machine learning models, and the emerging field of LLM,
LLMs.
which is specifically dedicated to the operational management of large language models.
Okay.
So we're starting to see specialized tools and frameworks emerging to handle these very specific operational needs.
So LLMs is definitely a term that I think anyone working in this space needs to become familiar with.
It's essential.
Can you give us a couple of examples of how this is being used in practice?
Yeah, so one compelling example is what we could call proactive runbook automation.
Yeah.
So imagine AI-generated runbooks
Right.
that can automatically execute those routine support tasks and even proactively resolve issues before they become major incidents.
So fewer fire drills.
Way fewer fire drills.
What's another one?
Another one is predictive incident response and automated remediation.
Okay, that sounds pretty futuristic.
It is, but it's becoming a reality. So AI systems can monitor infrastructure performance,
Right.
analyze historical data, and predict potential outages or performance bottlenecks.
Wow.
And then they can initiate predefined remediation workflows automatically.
So it's like the AI is anticipating problems before they even happen.
It's like having a crystal ball for your IT infrastructure.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
But are there any potential risks with AI making these kinds of autonomous decisions?
Yeah, you always have to be mindful of the potential for those hallucinations or inaccuracies in the AI's recommendations. And it's
Yeah.
really important to combine the LLM outputs with techniques like retrieval augmented generation or AgRag,
Right.
where the AI retrieves relevant information to kind of ground its responses and chain of thought reasoning to improve accuracy and reliability.
So making sure that the AI is thinking things through.
Exactly. And of course, cost consideration, scalability, all of that's important too.
Right. Practicality always comes into play.
Always.
Okay, let's move on to another critical area, and that's security, compliance, and governance.
Absolutely. Essential pillars of any IT architecture.
And arguably even more so as systems become more complex and interconnected.
Yeah, the stakes are higher than ever.
So how is AI helping organizations navigate this increasingly challenging landscape?
Well, GenAI can play a really valuable role in continuously monitoring systems for vulnerabilities, automating risk assessments, and helping to ensure ongoing compliance with all those regulations and internal policies.
Right.
So LLMs can be used to scan for known security weaknesses.
Okay.
They can automatically draft those compliance reports based on the system configurations
Wow.
and generate those initial risk assessment documents.
So it's almost like having an AI security analyst and compliance officer working 24/7.
It's like having a whole team of virtual experts at your disposal.
That's incredible. And are we seeing these established security and compliance frameworks being integrated into AI systems?
Absolutely. Things like NIST
Right.
and regulations like GDPR are increasingly being incorporated into AI governance models.
Okay.
So it's not just about AI doing its own thing. It's about AI operating within a structured ethical framework.
Right. It needs to play by the rules.
Absolutely.
Okay. Can you give us a couple of real-world examples of how this is being used?
Yeah. So one really interesting use case is what we could call RAG-enhanced compliance verification.
Okay.
So an LLM can leverage retrieval augmented generation to cross-reference an organization's internal policies. And those external regulations with the current system configurations and documentation.
Okay.
And it can flag any discrepancies.
So it's spotting potential violations before they become a problem.
Exactly. It's like a proactive compliance auditor.
What's another one?
Another one is what we could call an AI-driven compliance audit assistant.
Okay.
So this AI tool can scan through all the system configurations, data flows, access controls, and compare them against all those regulatory requirements and then generate those comprehensive reports.
So it's taking over a lot of the grunt work involved in audits.
Absolutely. And that frees up human auditors to focus on the more complex and nuanced issues.
Right.
It's about making the process more efficient and thorough.
So it sounds like AI is not just reacting to security incidents or compliance findings. It's actually helping organizations be more proactive.
It's shifting the focus from reactive to proactive.
That's great. But are there any inherent security or governance concerns when you're using AI in these sensitive areas?
Yeah. Preventing data leakage is a huge concern.
Right. You don't want the AI accidentally exposing confidential information.
Exactly. You've got to make sure that the AI is processing this data in a secure and controlled environment.
Right.
And mitigating bias and inaccuracies in the AI outputs is also crucial.
So the AI itself needs to be governed effectively.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's move on to another area that's fundamental to modern IT, and that's cloud integration and distributed systems.
Right.
So how is AI impacting the way architects design and manage these complex environments?
So GenAI is increasingly being used to assist architects with the design and management of those cloud-native architectures.
Hmm.
The integration of distributed systems and ensuring that everything is scalable and resilient.
Okay.
So LLMs can help design those microservices-based architectures.
Right.
They can orchestrate the different distributed components, generate those necessary deployment scripts.
So taking over a lot of the manual tasks.
Absolutely. And they can even optimize the use of cloud resources.
So it's making those cloud environments more efficient and more intelligent.
Exactly. And the major cloud providers,
Right.
IBM, AWS, Azure, they all have their own sophisticated AI offerings.
So they're embracing this trend as well.
Absolutely. They're integrating LLMs into their own tools and platforms.
So it's not just third-party vendors, it's the cloud providers themselves.
It's becoming a core part of the cloud landscape.
Can you give us a couple of examples of how this is being used in practice?
Yeah, so one key use case is what we could call dynamic cloud resource orchestration and optimization.
Yeah.
So imagine these LLM integrated monitoring tools that can analyze real-time resource consumption and predict future workload fluctuations.
Okay.
And then they can automatically adjust those cloud resources, scale them up or down as needed.
So you're only paying for what you need when you need it.
Exactly. It's all about optimization.
That's great. What's another one?
Another one is multi-cloud workload balancing and failover optimization.
Okay.
So you've got these AI-powered orchestration systems that are constantly monitoring the workload distribution across different cloud providers. And they can dynamically reroute traffic to ensure optimal performance and seamless failover if one of the providers has an issue.
So it's like an AI traffic cop for the cloud.
Exactly, keeping everything running smoothly.
So AI is really helping to manage those complex multi-cloud deployments.
It's becoming essential for multi-cloud success.
What are some of the key things that architects need to be thinking about in this context?
Well, balancing performance, latency, and cost effectiveness, that's always a challenge in the cloud.
Right, the classic triangle.
And then ensuring interoperability between legacy systems and those cloud services, that's also a big hurdle.
Right, hybrid cloud is still very much a reality for a lot of companies.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's talk about LLM apps and tooling.
Right.
We touched on this earlier, but let's dive a little deeper. What are the implications of this for architects?
So LLM apps, it's all about managing the entire life cycle of those large language models.
Right.
Everything from version control and fine-tuning to performance monitoring and deployment.
So it's kind of like DevOps, but specifically for LLMs.
That's a great way to think about it.
And we talked about LangChain and Weaviate earlier. Are those good examples of tools in this space?
They are. LangChain is great for orchestrating those LLM workflows. And Weaviate provides that efficient vector search capability that's really important for AI applications. So they're both becoming pretty indispensable in the LLM Ops toolkit.
So architects are using these tools to actually build and manage these LLM-powered systems.
Exactly. They're becoming core parts of the architect's arsenal.
Can you give us a concrete example of how this is being used?
Yeah, so one example is building what we could call a seamless LLM integration pipeline.
Okay.
So an architect might use a LangChain-based pipeline to seamlessly integrate the outputs from an LLM into existing applications.
So taking those AI insights and making them actionable.
Exactly. It handles things like crafting the prompts for the LLM, formatting the responses, managing the APIs.
So it's making it easier to embed AI into those enterprise systems?
Absolutely. It's streamlining the process.
What's another example?
Another one is deploying what we could call an automated model lifecycle management platform. So an organization might have a dedicated LLM-OS platform that automates the entire lifecycle of their deployed LLMs.
Okay.
So it's constantly fine-tuning the models on new data, retraining them if their performance starts to degrade.
So it's keeping those AI models healthy and performing well.
Exactly. It's about ensuring that the AI stays relevant and aligned with the business needs.
And it's doing it automatically, so you don't need an army of data scientists to constantly babysit it?
Precisely. It's about self-sufficiency.
What are some of the key considerations for architects when thinking about LLM apps?
Well, establishing those robust processes for continuous improvement of the AI models, that's crucial.
So it's not a one-time thing, it's an ongoing process.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And handling potential errors or biases within those AI pipelines.
Right, because AI is not perfect, it can make mistakes.
It can, and you need to be prepared for that.
And I imagine aligning LM apps with existing DevOps and MLOps practices is also important.
Absolutely. You want a cohesive approach across the organization.
Yeah, it can't be a siloed effort.
Exactly.
Okay, so finally, let's talk about organizational implications and future trends.
The big picture.
Yeah. So how is all this technological change impacting the way organizations are structured and operate, and where are things headed?
So we're seeing a real redefinition of traditional roles. Solution architects are increasingly evolving into what we might call cognitive architects,
Cognitive architects.
who are strategically leveraging AI tools as an integral part of their workflow.
So it's not about replacing architects, it's about empowering them.
Exactly. It's augmentation, not replacement.
And I imagine this also requires closer collaboration between different teams.
Absolutely. IT, data science, business leadership, everyone needs to be on the same page.
Right.
And those enterprise IT governance models, they need to adapt as well.
So it's not just a technological shift, it's an organizational shift as well.
It's a holistic transformation.
Can you give us a couple of examples of how this is playing out in the real world?
Yeah, so one example is the rise of what we might call strategic AI-driven innovation initiatives.
Okay.
So you've got these cross-functional teams that are leveraging AI-generated insights for strategic planning. And solution architects are playing a key role in collaborating with business leaders to interpret those insights and turn them into actions.
So AI is becoming a strategic tool, not just an operational one.
It's moving up the value chain.
What's another example?
Another one is the emergence of what we could call AI-enhanced strategic decision-making dashboards.
Okay.
So imagine a corporate board
Right.
using an AI-powered dashboard that can synthesize data from across the organization, simulate future scenarios, and provide predictive analytics.
Wow, so it's like giving the leadership team an AI-powered crystal ball.
It's about data-driven decision-making at the highest levels.
That's pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah.
So what are some of the key takeaways for organizations as they navigate this transformation?
Well, investing in training and change management is essential.
Right, you've got to get people on board.
Absolutely. And continuously assessing the risks, the performance, the ROI of AI.
Right.
And we're also seeing the formation of these new cross-functional teams that bring together expertise in LM Ops data governance and enterprise architecture.
So it's really breaking down those traditional silos.
Breaking down silos and building bridges.
Well, this has been an incredibly insightful deep dive into the impact of AI on IT solution architects.
Yeah.
So to kind of wrap things up, what's the one key message you want our listeners to take away from this conversation?
I think the key takeaway is that generative AI is rapidly becoming an essential tool for architects. It's enhancing their efficiency, it's giving them data-driven insights, and it's ultimately fostering greater innovation.
And it seems like the architect's role is really evolving into this human-AI partnership,
Absolutely. It's about leveraging the strengths of both.
where AI provides the speed, the knowledge, the data processing power.
And human architects provide the expertise, the critical thinking, the ethical judgment.
Exactly.
Ah.
So as our listeners are thinking about all this, I'd like to leave them with one final thought.
Okay.
How might this increasing integration of AI as a co-pilot fundamentally change the very definition of what an IT solution is? And what are the core responsibilities of an architect in the years to come?
That's a great question.
It's a lot to contemplate.
It is.
But I think this conversation has given us a lot to think about,
I hope so.
and a framework for understanding this really transformative trend. So thanks for joining us,
Thanks for having me.
and we'll see you next time for another deep dive.